Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Unravel Ministries podcast. Who is the Lord of the Time Lords? We're going to be discussing the one and only Rassilon, the Time Lord, President, Supreme, other adjectives here. We're excited to get some Doctor Who, Time Lord lore, the power dynamics that take place on Gallifrey in the show, and much more. It's going to be a great episode. We are the Priest to the Geeks. I am here with the one and only Reverend Justin Coleman, and I being, of course, Joshua Knoll. There might be others. Josh is a pretty common name. I don't know about Knoll, but we're excited to jump into this, though. Of course, we have to start off, Justin. I need to know what you're geeking out on lately. What's been your geek of choice?
Yeah, well, this geek of choice this time around has been a show called The Pit. Now, this is, so it's not my usual sci-fi comic, that kind of thing. This is a show about the Pittsburgh ER. It's in its first season, and the whole premise is they go through a 15-hour shift. So you have 15 episodes, each episode encompassing an hour of a shift on one day or part of one day in the ER. And I came to the show a little bit late, so I've been catching up. But man, I cannot get enough of this show. One of the most well written, I think, on TV right now. Very well written.
I have not seen that at all, actually. So I have to check that one out. I have been, I'm going to say probably surprising to absolutely no one. I've been highly anticipating. They're re-releasing the graphic novels for Dead Space. So I've been into volume 1. This will come back after he receives it, so I'll go ahead and let you know. I've also sent volume 1 to our good friend, Pastor Will Rose. I already read it, and I have to wait till June for them to re-release volume 2. But man, it's good stuff. Just getting kind of like the background history of what happened in the Dead Space video game universe, and comic book form just fleshes it out a little bit more. You don't get to experience it as fully, but kind of having that world fleshed out it's been great. I really enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite sci-fi worlds, and it's just hard to actually get hold of the content of it, which kind of makes it more fun. I don't know. I'm weird, but listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you're on a laptop, please consider rating and reviewing our show on Podchaser or Good Pods. It's going to help our show gain recognition, make it easier to find in search engines like Google. People use that, I'm told. If you're on your phone, though, consider rating, reviewing, or commenting on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Probably the app you're listening to, because those are the two most common apps that people listen to podcasts in. And if you rate, review, and comment on them, it prioritizes our show in their algorithms and tricks people into thinking our show is important. So do that, and we thank you in advance. It's free support. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it helps the show a ton. Little less free, we like to shout out our sponsors. We also have financial... I don't want to say struggles, financial responsibilities that come along with running a podcast, having to host it and get equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And the people who make some of that possible are our sponsors on Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon. Today, we're going to shout out James Barrett. We love you, James. You rock. And remember, everyone, if you'd like your own shout out, that you too can support our show for $3 a month. Again, on one of those 3 platforms, Apple Podcasts, Captivate, and Patreon. And it just makes it possible to do the show with all the financial hula hoops we have to jump through. So thank you guys so much. And without further ado, we're going to jump right into the main topic.
Anyway, come on. How long's he?
We're talking Rassilon. First thing first, just so people know who they're listening to ramble on, because like, why should we care what you guys think? I want to talk some about our own history with Rassilon. I'm just too curious to wait, so Justin's gonna have to go first because I need to hear the wisdom exude from this man.
Well, I've always been fascinated by Rassilon because of my watching classic Doctor Who as I was a kid. And we meet, you hear about Rassilon, but then we meet Rassilon in an episode called The Five Doctors. That technically is The Five Doctors, but Tom Baker didn't want to be in it. So you only get a glimpse of him, and they create a little storyline to talk about why we don't see much of him. But we encounter Rassilon, the myth, in this ghostly form, and he just seems so wise and interesting and really more clever than just about everybody except for the doctors combined. So I've been fascinated with who this Rassilon is, and it's been really interesting to see how Doctor Who has treated this character in its modern iteration. How about you? How did you connect with Rassilon first?
Man, I have such a weird history with Doctor Who. And I mentioned some of this on the show before. My first episodes I ever watched were the Satan's Pit or Devil's Pit or whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about? With David Tennant. Mm-hmm. And then like I went back a little ways. I didn't go back all the ways. I don't know how this happened. I found a place to start watching Doctor Who, and I was just watching the David Tennant episodes basically. Yeah. But I don't know how. I just grew up in a bubble, so I didn't know things about life or anything. I mean, I watched this thing. I had no idea that the Doctor regenerated. Like, I just thought David Tennant was the Doctor. Like, that's it. And like, I run through, you get to the end of the time, and I'm like, who the heck are these guys? And then all of a sudden, the Doctor dies and comes back with a new face. I'm like, who the heck is he? And I was infuriated, which it's probably unfair to Matt Smith. It's probably why I don't like him that much. I like just really biased because I was like, what? Who are you? But then once I realized what the show was, I started digging back, and back then you couldn't find the original series streaming places really. Mm-hmm. So I was going to like Books A Million and old video stores and finding like these old DVDs and stuff. At one point I had to change my PlayStation to think that it was in the UK because I got a DVD that wouldn't play on American players. So I could watch some of these. So like then that's when I got the DVD of the Five Doctors, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And it wasn't until literally today, preparing for this episode, that I was like, wait a minute, Rassilon wasn't even like a big thing until the Five Doctors. Like, he was just like a legend. And so I'm excited to get into this because it's just been mind blowing. The whole experience of Doctor Who just continues to be mind blowing.
Well, let me just say, I think that's really cool, the journey you've had, because one, you got to experience what so few of us ever have, is that it's like the transition from the first to the second Doctor. Like, you got to experience that emotionally in the move between David
just because I was ignorant. Yeah.
Like that, I mean, I think that's cool, but also like you had to work for it. Like this, growing understanding of the Doctor Who universe. I mean, getting DVDs, making PlayStation things, and like that is working for Doctor Who in ways that I've not had to. So kudos to you, man. That's pretty impressive.
It was well, I was in college and I could either study for school or do all this work to figure out what's going on in the world of Gallifrey and beyond.
Hey, I'm not the right person to critique those choices. I think it's commendable. I'm like, way to go, man.
Oh, man. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. It was a good time, but no, we both mentioned the Five Doctors already, right? Yeah. So you want to go ahead and unpack like who Rassilon was in the classic Doctor Who before this, and then like what did we learn about him through this?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the the myth and then go into the five doctors. I think that's a great way to do it. So, Rassilon as a character, I think is one of the most erratically portrayed characters in all of the Doctor Who universe. So let me just,
and maybe just in all of fandom.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, let's just start there and say this is
crazy.
It's really complex because you've got, it's like you get the myth, you got the lowercase m Messiah complex dude. You got, you got all kinds of stuff going on. So the myth of Rassilon in early Doctor Who, because he wasn't so much a character in classic Doctor Who as he was a myth. So he's the founding father of Time Lord society. Now we learn in more recently a little bit more of a complex narrative around that founding of Time Lord society, but whatever came before Rassilon was the one who codified Time Lord society. He's like Gallifrey's Prometheus here, right? So, but far better wardrobe. So he codifies Time Lord society, and he's created. He's credited with creating the time vortex. And these things like the Eye of Harmony or the Matrix, the Time Lord Matrix, and he was credited originally with creating the immortality technology. We learned some other pieces around that, so that's a little bit fuzzy, but he's at least the one who made sure that this whole rhythm of regeneration, that kind of thing, really was codified in Time Lord historical. And so perhaps he created the history of the Time Lords, even if he didn't exactly create the technology. So the Time Lords venerate the guy. There's statues. There's a tomb in classic Doctor Who. He's got a tomb with this ominous warning about his power. Like he's larger than life, even larger than Time Lord life, as he is so central in Gallifrey's origin story. So, and he's got there's these belts and gauntlets. Like he's got all kind of stuff. Rassilon has. He's got all the coolest of Time Lord toys, and he created Time Lord toys. He creates the TARDIS.
Yeah.
Right. So he's a genius on one hand. He's like this lowercase god in Time Lord life, kind of like Pharaoh like, or Caesar like, right? He's a ghost, even after he has willingly put himself into a tomb in some kind of stasis. He decided to do that because Rassilon wasn't just going to die. He was going to remain immortal in some kind of way. Like this is all of the stuff around Rassilon that we learn in bits and pieces in classic Who, and then see in the Five Doctors as we see his disembodied head floating over his tomb, with all kinds of playful and judgmental energy, and because he's created this game of. I think it's called the game of Rassilon, something like that. So
the death games.
And it's essentially this immortality trap for the over ambitious Time Lord. So whereas he may have known that Time Lords could have this immortality, for some reason he decided to cap it, and then he creates this immortality trap for these folks who want to transcend the normal number of regenerations for a Time Lord. I mean, it's just there's something Tolkien-esque about his that version of him. It's like this. like a warning and a relic with mythic power, and it's like it's really cool. I mean, he's cool, he's dangerous in the Five Doctors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and what's so interesting is seeing like the classic Who portrayal of him and like the lore that happened before we start seeing him more frequently, right? Is like it's like he's talked about like he's benevolent, like he was this great ruler that saved them from all this different stuff and all this stuff, like almost like you said, Messiah. It would be like we had the tomb of Jesus, but for some reason on the tomb is written, beware, he might just kick your ass. And you're like, what? Like, and it's just like, it's so random and so weird. But like the interesting thing to me is like a lot of the stories about him back then that I've seen are a lot more like, he was a ruler, he had all this power, and he capped the amount of regenerations you could have because he didn't want us to get too power hungry, right? Or he said Time Lords would be chosen at random genetically, so it wasn't like just a purebred, we don't end up becoming racist on Gallifrey. Like he did all this like power checks. And as an American, I can't help but think of similar things, but I'm going to leave that alone for a second. Yeah. But it's interesting because it's like he does all these power checks, but then when we actually see him later on, we're going to get to it, he's the power hungry one. It's like, what? Wait a minute. What?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think he is he's a more complex character than even Hoodum has given him credit for being. When you think about the myth and the legend. Now, yes, he, so on the one hand, he creates Time Lord society such that he is the pinnacle of it. But also the safeguards. So, we could say like, the safeguards are to safeguard his own power, maybe.
Yeah, maybe he just knew himself that well.
Right. So, that could be part of it. But there's also that he helps to establish these rules for time that maybe it was through trial and error, but in certain ways did create protections that were healthy protections from the chaos that these powers could hold. And so I think that I like to think that he's got more dimensions than we see in the power hungry version. And also, if he truly was a part of the inventing, if this myth has any truth to it, if he was a part of the inventing of all these different things in Time Lord society, he really is a person whose intellect really ought to rival the Doctor.
Oh yeah,
and maybe even exceed the Doctor. Other than the Doctor, if Rassilon is so determined to have this power, maybe the Doctor acts as a mirror and a kind of an accountability for the Doctor for Rassilon. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's all great. And you could really dig into a lot of this, like who is it that creates power caps in our world, all this kind of stuff. And maybe we'll do like a primarily political episode. We'll go back over Rassilon one day. But
yes,
I want to talk about the great vampires because this is the wildest thing that I learned getting ready for this. It's so random. At some points, apparently they were the jinn, like from Muslim tradition, and at some point they're like all these different. There's one theory that there's actually only one of them, and he's just so powerful he splits himself into like a billion. And I'm like, wait, what? Like this is so random. One of the theories is actually that Rassilon's testing with time actually allowed them to enter in from another dimension because they're actually like a demonic force from another dimension or something.
Right.
But because of the great vampires. I hate this is just so weird. This is like Doctor Who comics from classic era, I think. Yeah. But because of them, that's actually why Rassilon got a lot of the power that he did. He was, accumulating stuff, inventing new stuff because they were in a war, the Eternity War, which basically he became president during that so that the Time Lord were able to defeat the great vampires, which again, demonic forces from another dimension. I want them defeated. Cool. He defeated them. That's great. Like, the guy feels like a hero to me when you hear this part of the story, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, and again, this is, and so I only know bits and pieces about this as well, but yeah, this eternity or eternal war thing, so Rassilon in this iteration really is like our current Doctor in this iteration, So rather than fighting other beings from other planets who are amassing great power, we've got these like mythic creatures that come from elsewhere. And Rassilon is like the Doctor in being the one to go toe to toe with these creatures, and play a significant role in leading the Time Lords to victory over these vampires who can.
I was like, I could tell you tried not to say vampire. Like,
I know. I mean, these vampires who, but they're like, so they're slightly. They reanimate the dead, right, into vampire like servants, and so that's the whole thing, and so like Rassilon is leading the way in this, and the Doctor becomes a hero, and I think killing the king of but Rassilon essentially wins the war. Against these things. It's just, it's strange.
Yeah. What's strange to me too, this is just like a side note, how much they look like the comics portrayal in Marvel of the Skrull, the shape-shifting aliens, because they also are shapeshifters. I'm like, I feel like a little bit it might have pulled from that, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Don't know. Oh man.
Man.
But the reason I still bring it up, even though it's silly and ridiculous and neither of us know a ton about it, it seems like the thing that is interesting is going to tie us into the new the first new Doctor Who before we get to the new Doctor Who. Because what happens is Gallifrey, Rassilon's either in a deep sleep or he's actually dead. There's actually showrunners have argued about this on different podcasts and recordings and different stuff. So it seems like not even the showrunners know if he was just asleep or like dead. They don't know. But since Rassilon was either asleep or dead, Gallifrey was in an era of peace. They stopped preparing for war. They've just been in peace for so long, in part thanks to what Rassilon did to stop the Eternity War with the Great Vampires. So when the Time War starts with the Daleks, it happens between the classic Doctor Who and the new Doctor Who. We don't actually see most of it until later on. We see some, but that the Daleks caught the Time Lords by surprise. They weren't ready for war, and that's why they bring Rassilon back, is because they weren't ready for war, and they knew this was the guy who defeated the Great Vampires. We need him back now. And that's when I think you start seeing kind of a shift in his character a little bit. But we don't learn a lot of it until you get more into the new Doctor Who, and we get to like the end of time. We learn what Rassilon did to the Master and some of Rassilon's plans. Do you want to unpack like what happens in the end of time? What part does Rassilon play in all this?
So, okay. Looking at Rassilon, his return, and he's played by Timothy Dalton. This is in the Russell T Davies era. So Rassilon comes back as like the Doctor Who version of Ra's al Ghul. So he's been reincarnated, but he's got this like mad tyrant, like whatever the pool they put him in or whatever the stuff they put him in to reincarnate him, or revive him or whatever. He in the Peter Capaldi era, he calls himself Rassilon the Resurrected, right? So whatever they did to resurrect the guy, he's War Rassilon, and he's just bent on winning, and he can vaporize people with his gauntlet, and his way of wanting to win the war is by ending reality, right, as we know it, and then like ascending to some non-physical form of something, which is but it's going to wipe everything out it's going to wipe out everything that he has formerly created a whole society to protect. So, I mean, even if so, I'll concede that perhaps Rassilon was most concerned with Time Lords themselves. So if it's Time Lords against the rest of reality, he's all in for the Time Lords. Okay, I mean, I'll concede that, but so much of the society that he built around the Time Lords and the protections of these and having rules for time travel was meant to protect reality. And so for him to just be like, if I can't live in this reality as I want it, I'm just going to burn it to the ground. I mean, I do think that's a really interesting choice for this character, ambitious, power hungry, power drunk, even without any kind of limit.
Yeah.
Hello there, listener. This is Evan Garcia, and I just wanted to jump in here to remind you and to let you know of our Facebook groups and our Discord server. These are great communities where you can post and share memes and talk with the hosts, and we have votes and some polls for future episode topics and fun interactions with our hosts. So just wanted to remind you that we are focused on community with you listeners, and we love each and every one of you guys listening. Thank you, guys.
Well, one thing I saw that was interesting for this to think about. I saw somewhere that it said that apparently before Rassilon put himself in the eternal sleep or whatever, he had a theory, which is part of why he did the capstone in the first place, that if you regenerated enough, you would stop being recognizable to yourself. Like you actually lose part of yourself after a certain amount of time. Another Batman reference. It's that whole, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain or die the hero. And I think that's what we see kind of here. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a really, really fascinating theory. And, and you even see the Doctor wonder about whether you can actually live too long. I mean, in his low, not his, in their, I guess it's use the name, in their low moments, there's this question about, have I lived too long? And so yeah, I mean that maybe, Rassilon may have been thinking about this as well as that's an interesting question. So you get Rassilon, mad tyrant here, and then that goes south, right? So the Doctor foils Rassilon.
The Master foils Rassilon.
Yeah, well, that's right. Sorry, that's right. The Master foils Rassilon, and then it's like back to the Time Ward, with Rassilon. So Gallifrey begins to start to fall in this, but then we find in the Peter Capaldi era, so this is part of the Moffat era, an actor by the name of Donald Sumter, I think is his name, plays Rassilon. And so we're in, Hellbent is episode. Rassilon returns. He is quieter. He's older. He's powerful still, but he's a little bit different. So the Time War has been lost. Gallifrey had been lost in this kind of bubble pocket universe thing that the Doctor contrived.
Timey-wimey stuff.
The timey-wimey stuff. The Doctor and all of the Doctor's incarnations didn't work their TARDISes together to create that, and so Rassilon, if he ever had the Doctor's respect, which we don't know, I mean, from classic era, if the Rassilon ever had the Doctor's respect, it's totally gone here, and so So the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi's Doctor, walks into Gallifrey and Rassilon, and he's just not having any Rassilon stuff. Like the Doctor, it has at this point taken billions of years to break into Gallifrey after this another messy test that Rassilon and the High Council has put the Doctor into to try to figure out who the hybrid was, and the Doctor, Rassilon wants to bring the forces of Gallifrey against the Doctor, like exterminate this guy. He's not giving us what we want. I can kill you as many times as necessary. We're gonna run out your regeneration. And the Doctor got nothing but his presence, so no violence. But with his just refusal to engage Rassilon and his shaming Rassilon in this way, he wins away the day, and then Rassilon is exiled from Gallifrey. So I mean, you got this. Like this, the founder of the Time Lords, the man, the myth, the legend, literally in Time Lord society, is just cast out by the Time Lord that never wanted. Well, the Time Lord that never wanted the throne. Like he never wanted to be. President of the Time Lords, though he was made president multiple kind of times. So Rassilon, who we've learned to be some kind of tyrant and a resurrected, low-key messiah. He thinks of himself as a messiah to the Time Lord Society. He's cast out by the person who never wanted to be the leader.
Yeah.
There's a power to that, but again, I still think it's like the character of Rassilon's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too that's interesting to me, going through like the Time War stuff I'm like, it is all weird. And there's still more to go that we have to talk about because we haven't seen them after that, but there's some implications to stuff that happened. But so during the Time War, they isolate Gallifrey in like a time bubble so that what happens doesn't affect the entire rest of the universe because Time War, that's scary, right? And I think that's actually Rassilon who does that initially. But I think the Doctor just kind of seals it off, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's a little blurry. But what Rassilon does is he sends he sends the Master into the vortex with the beat of the Time Lords, the bum, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys have probably heard the bum, 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 bum. And that's like, so the Master has that stuck in his head. And this whole time we thought the Master was gone crazy. He just has this rhythm in his head for no reason. And then we're like, oh wait, someone did this to him.
Yeah.
So that's what's crazy when the Master takes over the world and all this stuff in Doctor Who, and you're like, oh, what a bad guy. And you realize, oh, actually someone was behind that.
That's right.
And then he ruins Rassilon's plan. And you're like, but Rassilon was the head of the council. Shouldn't we be cheered for him? Like, I'm like, huh? Then what really stands out. So the Day of the Doctor is the 50th anniversary where all the Doctors get together and we learn more about the Time War. I think here's the big difference between the Doctor and Rassilon. I think the Rassilon was better than the Doctor up until the Time War. And what happened was, because just like the Doctor had the War Doctor, he didn't even count that as one of his regenerations. Like he changed so fundamentally by war, but he chose to regenerate into someone new. Rassilon, I think he stayed War Rassilon. It would have been like if the Doctor stayed War Doctor as opposed to moving on. I think that's kind of what happened.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, it's because he becomes something that's different than at least we, from the character of Rassilon that we know, or we think we know at least. He becomes something fundamentally different. You're right, and he creates the Master. You're right. He absolutely creates the Master. He puts something in the Master when the Master is a little child that just creates a madness in him that makes him, this constant wayward child of Gallifrey who can go toe to toe with the Doctor so many times, but is just bent on kind of evil domination is what we think. So that's really interesting to think about the Rassilon as the legend moving to this God King character, and in order to win, and never being able to let that iteration go, even as he regenerates.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to make two analogies, a silly one and then a serious one with that. Then we can move on to the other stuff. Cause I want to sit on this for a minute. Cause so the silly one, yeah, you mentioned Ra's al Ghul. I feel like it would be as if Batman somehow discovered that his teacher Ra's al Ghul actually is the one that made Joker crazy. Like, I feel like that's like the equivalent of this.
Yeah.
It's like when you realize after the master, it's like, wait a minute, but I'm supposed to hate that guy. Like, it's like, wait a minute. So it's very similar to like if that would have happened. The real life thing that I think actually does scare me. And I want to address it because we say that we're going to address the questions that RIPs are addressing. And I don't want to just pass it by without actually looking at this. I think this is a lot of what the church in America is doing right now. It's like we've changed ourselves to be like, okay, we're going to be okay and turn our eyes to Donald Trump, to, all these political leaders, because we need power right now so that we can combat whatever social wars we think are so important. And I'm wondering if the church is going to ever because, everyone thinks they're going to be like the Doctor. I'm just going to stop being the war doctor once this is over, we'll move on to the next thing. But I think in reality, most of us are Rassilon and we just stay the war doctor, we just stay in that mentality. And I think that's what I'm seeing happening. That's scary.
Man, dude. Okay. So I'm loving.
Yeah. This is for you to go.
What
just
you're cooking up, buddy. Loving what you're cooking up because, okay. So we're going to just keep on throwing out some analogies here. So if we think of Rassilon like a mirror. So let's think about both the Doctor and Rassilon as certain kinds of in a relationship to a mirror, right? So I think about what N.T. Wright has said in that, like, what the church is meant to do is reflect the glory of heaven. The church stands like the image he uses is the church is a mirror in the midst of a doorway. So we're supposed to reflect the glory of God and all the fullness of heaven and new creation into the world. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to kind of keep on playing with this imagery of a mirror. So what Rassilon does is, in a way that is filled with the power, filled with the seduction of power of empire, power and legacy of empire.
Yeah.
Is Rassilon reflects Gallifrey in multiple ways. Like he reflects its myth. He reflects its in the David Tennant era. It reflects the madness of Gallifrey. I mean, it's like a chaotic madness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the Capaldi era, it's like Gallifrey becomes pathetic in a way. It's like it's a declining empire. Rassilon reflects those things. What the Doctor does is it's a different kind of a mirror, or maybe what the Doctor does, which will argue. Then I'm moving this a little bit away from what N.T. Wright said. I mean, as far as it relates to the world, the church is meant to be like the Doctor, and it's meant to stand outside of that Rassilon mirror. It's meant to challenge what the Rassilon mirror stands for, the power legacy of the empire, the myths of the empire, the madness of the empire, the decline of the empire. The church is meant to stand outside of that. So we're not reflecting empire; we're reflecting kingdom of God. We're reflecting heaven and new creation, and so the Doctor acts as that kind of counterpoint to Rassilon. Rassilon just Rassilon wants to reflect the world, and the doctor wants to reflect heaven, if you will.
Yeah.
And the church is meant to be like the doctor in that. But as you say, it's so easy for us to, reflect the power and legacy of empire. I mean, this is Constantine. One of my congregants was talking to me about Constantine, the Constantinian settlement, just this past weekend after Easter worship. He was sitting out on the lawn talking about these things like you do, and so you get things from the Constantinian settlement, or the church becoming the official religion of the Holy Roman Empire. You get things like the Nicene Creed.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, which unifies all the historic branches of the church. People have to actually sit down. Yeah, right. People actually have to sit down and convene and agree and talk about like what's most central and core to the Christian life theologically. So we think that is a good thing. So you get that. So let's call that like the creation of the TARDIS. You get some good things.
Yeah.
But then you also get all of this like imperial stuff. And so the church starts reflecting the empire, the power and legacy of the empire. What does it mean that we can have our own army now? What does it mean that we can dominate, that we can create peace, not just by turning the other cheek, but by turning other cheeks? Like what happens when you actually have power? And we are in the life of this country, we wrestle with that seduction.
Hey guys, again, thank you so much for listening to our show and being part of the Systematic Geekology team. If you want to support our team, you can do so by going to Captivate. And I know most people don't listen on Captivate, but it's in the description wherever you're listening. You can go to our website. At the very bottom, you have the options to either subscribe, and you'll get some extra content and fun stuff, like our bonus questions, all those kind of things that hopefully you all come to love as much as I love making them with our fellow geekologists on the team. We also are hoping to do some future D&D campaigns, stuff like that, and all that's available for our sponsors. But if you don't have those extra funds and you're not really into the subscription thing, you can also leave a one-time tip, just one-time thing to help out our show as we kind of stay in the game with podcasting, keep relevant with all the technology and all that stuff. And it costs a lot to run a show, and we appreciate you for your help. Again, thank you so much for listening. We value your time, and it means a lot to us that you give us your time by listening to our show and supporting us in that way. If you feel led to support financially as well, we appreciate that. Let's get back to the show. Oh yeah.
And give into it far too often.
Yeah. Well, and then the thing that bugs me with that too, because I don't want to just come off as, I don't want to both sides this. I do think Donald Trump is worse than any alternative for the most part. But at the same time, I don't want to let everybody off the hook who just didn't vote for Donald Trump. Like, oh, you're fine. Because what happens is, and we see this in politics and in the church, where like we go, when our guy's in power, it's like, well, we don't want the filibuster anymore. We want more judges added to the court, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden when the other guy's in, we're like, actually, all that stuff is bad. We got to stay to the Constitution, stay to the original rules. It's like, wait, but when you were in charge, you didn't want those rules, And I think the church is doing the same thing where it's like, oh, separation of church and state when it's someone they don't like in office. And then all of a sudden, when someone who maybe is doing stuff that gives them more power, it's, well, separation of church and state, that's not really a thing. And, it'd be better if more Christians were in office. And I'm like, hold up. What? You said the opposite thing just a couple of years ago. And my thing, it's not necessarily about consistency. It's more about like principles. Do you want the separation regardless of if your person's in power or not?
Well, principles. Yeah, I'm glad you used that word because it does nearly relate to principalities. So, I think that we do wrestle with powers and principalities, as Paul talks about.
Yeah.
And this I mentioned it as a seduction to power. But these powers, these principalities have a force, and that force can be, in one way to talk about it, is seductive, but another way to talk about it is blinding. This, I mean, we're going to different fandoms here. This is like in the dark side of the force, right? You can't see so when you're, if the balance is off in the force, especially those who are seeking to practice the light side of the force, you just can't see. You can't see what's going to happen. You can't see like the cause and effect. The outcomes are unclear. But here's what's really, you can't see when you're participating in the growing darkness. And I like lifting that up, or I want to lift it up today because, as I talked about on Sunday, and this year when Easter lined up across East and West, in the Orthodox Church, they don't read John 20 on Easter Sunday. They read John chapter 1 because it's about linking up with the cosmic mission of Christ, to let you know that this whole resurrection thing started at the very beginning with the Word, before all of creation. Like this. So this is part of a movement. The resurrection is part of a movement that from the very beginning. And in this whole bit around darkness and light that John wants to talk about, that when there's a certain kind of darkness, you can bring God to the world. You can bring the Word to the world, the word that created the world, all that is, created all the created clarity of all that is, and all of the created universe. This Word that created you don't recognize when it's among you. I mean, that's what John 1 tries to say, because of the darkness. So you have an inability to recognize darkness for darkness, and you have an inability to recognize what actually represents the light. And I think that's part of the challenge that the church always has, is like, man, am I able to see here? And Jesus, you got to help me to see, because I might be blinded by the darkness, and I might be confusing that darkness for light.
Yeah. I mean, we see that all throughout the history of the church, and in Doctor Who. And it's not just one kind of power. It's not just like of darkness, right? It's not just, political power. We see through the church at one point, it was conquest, right? We had this mindset of like, we'll conquer these other countries. We had the Crusade, we had the Inquisition, all kinds of stuff that proves this, that we thought if we would just defeat people through violence, then we'll raise up the new people to be good Christians. And we kind of justified it that way. And we look back on it with our modern eyes going, wow, that was crazy. That was so evil. How could they fall for that? And then like you look at Germany, how much the church supported the Nazis. Why? Because he was like promising power, and you guys are being belittled for all this stuff. And they fell for it. Like, how did they fall for that guy? And that's what I'm saying. Like the darkness might look different. It might be, okay, well, we're going to let these people lie to the other ones because they're the bad guys. And if we deceive the bad guys, then we'll get what we really want. Or if we get our political power, it doesn't matter who gets us there, then we can really share about Jesus. And the problem is, once you start, like you said, participating in the darkness, when the light comes, you're so engulfed in lies and power hunger and violence, you can't see the thing. And that's why future generations will look back and go, how did they fall for that? That's going to happen to us too. One day the future is going to look back and be like, how did they fall for that?
Well, I mean, so this is, getting back to Rassilon here.
Yeah.
So just connected. So like there is, so Rassilon as a character is, as a Time Lord, fluid. He regenerates, he reforms, he reinvents, we think that as we look at the past, the sad and dangerous things that have happened in the past, we think of it as static. Well, these kinds of ideas regenerate and reform and reinvent, just like good ideas do.
Yeah.
Just like good ideas do. So you got Rassilon is regenerating, and it just as the Doctor is regenerating here. And so he's not just one man, he's an idea that, regenerates and reforms and reinvents over time. In an idea, especially a dangerous idea, is dangerous ideas can be hard to kill. They can be hard to end. And so, part of the challenge, part of what it means to be in the light as Jesus is in the light, is to ask for this divine clarity. Like, Lord, help me to see a bad idea. Help me to see a dangerous idea.
Yeah.
And help me to recognize it across time and history, such that when a dangerous idea in its regenerated, reformed, reinvented, is so that when it's before me, I can recognize it as such, just as I try to recognize what is consistent with the God in Jesus Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit, just as I hope to also recognize that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Being able to recognize not only the light and God's voice, but also what's not God's voice. Oh man. Well, man, we got derailed with the important stuff. So let's get back to the silly stuff, the fandom stuff. Maybe not silly, fandom stuff. Yeah. So Rassilon gets blindsided. He becomes this other thing. He gets kicked off Gallifrey, but there's still some history with Gallifrey that maybe tells us something about Rassilon, perhaps. There's the story of the Day of the Doctor, where we realize the Doctor has been around a lot longer than we thought, and maybe a lot of what we thought, not the Endless Child, not the Day of the Doctor, sorry, but maybe a lot of what we thought about Time Lords and like what all Rassilon invented, turns out they might have just stole from a baby that turned out to be the Doctor one day. It's a ridiculous plot. I actually don't like the story very much, but I think it has a lot of cool implications for overall Doctor Who universe. Yeah, Justin, you want to unpack some of that? I don't know.
Yeah, so this is a controversial bit of Doctor Who canon, maybe canon, that we're dealing with, in that the idea of the timeless child. And we don't know where the timeless child came from, but the timeless child is able to regenerate, and so the Time Lords hack the DNA, the abilities of this timeless child, who turns out to be the Doctor.
What?
And then through a lottery system, imbue various members of their society with this regeneration ability. And oh my gosh, it is so it shatters. So the Master figures this out, and it shatters the Time Lord myth for the Master, and then the Master can't help but think, my gosh, my BFF / frenemy of all time, the Doctor is this timeless child. And so if this is the canon, it means that either Rassilon participated in this, taking this child, experimenting on this child, hacking this child's DNA so that others could be given this power, including himself. So either Rassilon was there for that, participated in that, or Rassilon came along and said, or Rassilon Steve Jobs Steve Jobs did, and said, "Okay, this is cool. Let me make something really awesome." And just said, "This is, I'm going to show you all how we can make a society out of this." And so it's really, it's not exactly clear how this worked, but it seems to be the genesis, the true genesis of Time Lord Society, which drives the Master just crazy about it. I mean, Time Lord Society is always messing with the Master, and so the Master determines to end Time Lord Society because of this, because of learning the truth behind it all.
Yeah, which, not going to get into a side tangent, but also is kind of reminiscent for a lot of people who learned the truth about church or the churches they grew up in, and were like, "Oh, let me go after it." And you have, and this is what Will talks about, the difference of a hero and a villain, right? Bad thing happens to you, and do you either decide, I want this to happen to everyone else too, or do you decide, I'm not going to let this happen to anyone else? And again, that's a lot of the difference between the Doctor and the Master. Master says everyone has to go through this. What's ironic about this for the story geeky stuff, the Master, the way it's sold, wipes out all life on Gallifrey. But if you remember from Heaven Sent, Rassilon was already kicked out of Gallifrey, so he might not have been wiped out. Rassilon might still be out there. Yep,
ready to recreate the society that was just, just was ended. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of crazy turns and shifts and twists. And does this make sense? We really don't know. But
it became, Time Lord lore became so chaotic at that point, because you get this, you in the end, toward the end of Matt Smith's era as the Doctor, when the 11th Doctor meets the Curator, who's a Tom Baker iteration of the Doctor revisiting faces.
Old faces. Yeah.
Before David Tennant got to be the Doctor multiple times, Tom Baker got to be the Doctor multiple times here in that episode, and it makes this whole thing about the Doctor finding Gallifrey again, and so but was that only for Gallifrey to exist for like a few episodes and then be
wiped out? It's like, we just need the Doctor to be sad. We got to get him back there. I don't know, man. That part, just from a story perspective, is just kind of frustrating for me. But in Russell T Davies, we trust. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
So they have muted that story a bit. I mean, they haven't dismissed it, but they've muted it quite a bit.
Yeah. And then, with the timeless child, there's the questions of like, was Rassilon ever benevolent? Did he steal from this child? We don't know. But it seems like at one point, especially because Heaven Sent, they talked about how he was a good guy at one point. It seems like he was benevolent at one point. He did a lot of the stuff to win the Eternity War. He came back to try to win the Time War, trying to protect our universe from other dimensional demons or the Daleks that are just, space Nazis or something, right? Like he did a lot of good. But then it's also like, were the means ever good? And then also, is he always power hungry? Or did the reason he had these cool rules because he was power? There's a lot of questions that are left unanswered. Like what our bonus question is going to be. We're going to tell you here in a minute. But first, Justin, I think I'm going to wrap up if you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more after the episode, we're going to ask a bonus question. And it's just going to be, how would we like to see Rassilon return? Assuming that he didn't die in the Gallifrey massacre that the Master did. He was off planet. How would we like to see Rassilon return? That's what we're going to be asking after the episode. For now, though, we have to give everybody a recommendation. Justin, do you have any recommendations for our listeners today?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm going to say again, go and watch The Pit, P-I-T-T, like Pittsburgh. And it's a great show if you're interested in medicine.
Yeah. I'm going to recommend Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. If you left the Ratchet & Clank franchise because it got stale or got old or because they're just too long in between, it's worth going back to those games because Rift Apart might be the best Ratchet & Clank game. It's crazy. I'm just now getting to it. It's a couple years old now, but I'm like, man, I was missing out. It was great. But with that in mind, we are wrapping up here. Again, if you're on your laptop, please consider rating and reviewing our show on Podchaser or Good Pods. It's going to help our show gain recognition, make it easier to find on search engines like Google. If you're on your phone, please consider rating, reviewing, or commenting on our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That's going to prioritize our show in those apps. And it's free. It only takes a little bit of time and it helps our show a whole lot, and we really appreciate it. We also appreciate those who financially are able to support the show. Our sponsors rock. You can sponsor our show on Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon. Today we're shouting out the one and only James Barrett. Thank you so much for your help keeping the lights on, man. If you guys would like your own shout out, you too can be like James and support our show for $30 a month on one of those three platforms: Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon. And of course, we need to do one very important thing. Just remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hey friends, your pal Will Rose here. Sometimes I ask myself, have you ever wondered how you can support systematic geekology? Yes, I have. And well, if you're like me, you want systematic geekology to continue to grow and thrive. And you can do that by joining Patreon for as little as $3 a month. As a patron, you get bonus episodes. We answer bonus questions that our patrons get to hear. We have special shout outs. We have certain episodes that the patrons pick. So you help us create and curate the content that we put out for the world to hear. You even get free merch. And when I say that we're a worldwide podcast, that I'm not being hyperbolic. Somebody told me that we have over 20,000 subscribers from all over the world, and just half of those subscribers join Patreon for $3 a month. We would be set on keeping moving forward with the tech that we need to have the quality of podcast that we want our hearers to experience. And it'll help us get to certain events and conventions so that we can see you face to face and geek out with you in person. And let me just share that there's no shame, no guilt. If you can't join Patreon at this point, that's okay. That's okay. Just keep listening, keep sharing, keep liking, because yes, we're proud of what we're doing at Systematic Geekology. And friends, guess what? You can subscribe to Patreon for free to receive one extra bonus episode a month via the Patreon or Spotify app. That is fantastic. And we're glad that you're a part of it.
Hi, friends. It's Laura here. And I just wanted to say thank you for listening to our show. Systematic Geekology is a part of a larger podcast network called the Anazal Podcast Network. Dummy for Theology is Joshua Noel's show discussing different theological topics from various perspectives and attempting to give people more questions than answers. My Seminary Life is Brandon Knight's show. It started as him going through what he was learning in seminary, and after he graduated, he's been doing independent studies and has a lot of fun series like on hermeneutics, Bonhoeffer Summer, and worship. And then Friday Night Frights is a monthly show with Christian Ashley and Joe Day. They have a vote on the Systematic Geekology Facebook group to choose a topic each month and discuss everything from cryptos to ghosts to aliens to serial killers and more. So we hope you'll give it a listen, and thanks for being part of what we're putting out there.